All right. Uh, let's see who's on the live stream. Let's see. Okay. All right. We have one viewer joining us from our Facebook group. We'll just get started in about a minute here. Just wait for people
Yep.
to join the stream and
Yeah,
get
give you
going.
a bit of time to join us.
Yeah. Hi. A comment. So Facebook user, we can't see who you are. So if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, if you give StreamYard permission, then we'll know who you are. Otherwise, it just shows as Facebook user. So yeah. All right, we have 3 people on the stream.
Well, hi, Sarah.
Hey, Kais, how are you doing? Okay. Anthony's cat.
Hey, well, do we want to get started? We've got 5
Yeah.
people now, so I think
Yeah, I
we're
think
good
let's
to
get
get
started. I'm
going.
sure more people will join in as time goes. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. We just wanted to cover everything to do with secondary suites, specifically in Calgary today. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. So before we wanted to get started, we just have a quick disclaimer. We're both realtors with the Calgary Real Estate Board with eXp Realty. We're not in any way affiliated with the City of Calgary, nor do we claim to be experts with regards to secondary suites in Calgary. So for the most up-to-date information, we recommend that you contact the city directly when it comes to legalizing your basement suite. All right?
Yeah, this is just our opinion based on our own experiences.
Yep. That's right. Okay, so before we move on to talking about secondary suites, there's a very important distinction to make, and that's to note that backyard, whatever you want to call it, backyard, garage, garden, carriage suites, all of these things are different from what we call a secondary suite. So although they're very similar in terms of the building standards, backyard suites have different considerations compared to secondary suites. So there's stuff like, the more appropriate and thoughtful placement of windows, so that it doesn't affect your neighbor's backyard privacy, so on and so forth. And the cost to build a backyard suite can also be very, very different, and in most cases, substantially more than a basement/secondary suite. Okay, so for the purposes of this presentation today, we're only focusing on secondary suites.
Yeah, if you'd like to know more about the backyard suites, feel free to reach out to us. We can have a discussion with you as well. But yeah, like Santosh said, they're quite different.
That's right. Okay, so there's a question that's commonly asked, like, what's the point of making your unit a legal suite, right? Like, what's the benefits of it? And there's a few. So first up, you want to comply with the city regulations so you don't get in trouble when a city inspector comes by. Second of all, you're going to add to your property's resale value, right? It's always more appealing for a potential buyer or even an appraiser when they walk into your property and they know that it's a legal property with a sticker on it versus an illegal suite. Um, and it's just going to help your resale value right there. Um, Easier mortgage financing. If your property is a legal suite and it's renovated, then it makes it much easier for potential buyers to qualify for your property because lenders will often include the rent or potential rent from a legal suite, whereas they would not in most cases for an illegal suite. So that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to sell a property that could be legalized. It's almost better to legalize the property and then sell it. Okay. Reduced insurance liability. So you don't want to have an illegal suite and a tenant in there. And if you end up having a fire or a flood in the basement, that's just going to be an insurance nightmare. So you want to reduce liability where you can. Make sure your suite is legal and up to code. And then the next 2 points, it gives tenants assurance that your suite is safe and code compliant. So the city has a secondary suite registry. So all tenants or anyone who's interested, for that matter, can go and look up a particular address and see if a suite is legal. And it's in your best interest to make sure your suite's legal before you rent it out. Because if not, and if your tenant doesn't pay, or if your tenant can blackmail you by going to the city and saying, "Hey, I live in an illegal suite and my landlord's doing so and so," right? So it's highly recommended. You might as well legalize your suite. And
Just to
lastly,
note,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just to note too on the easier mortgage financing, the most lenders, especially A lenders, don't consider any income from an illegal suite. So that's a big consideration if you're purchasing a property that currently has an illegal suite. Likely, the lender will use market rent based on the property being rented as one unit. Um, Once you have the legal suite, you can use that income, so it will help you qualify for future properties. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the last point I wanted to bring up is when you legalize your suite, you're going to have to be doing a lot of drywall, a lot of wiring, and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely a good opportunity to update your unit if you're already going to be doing all that work to open up walls and whatnot. Okay. So oftentimes we find that when people start legalizing their suite, they might as well update the kitchen, or they redo the ceiling, or they repaint, or whatever the case is. Okay. All right. Next slide. So how do I make a legal suite? It's a very common question. People probably know two ways. You can build a brand new legal suite, or you can legalize your existing illegal suite. Now, what's the preferred way? It really depends on your personal goals. Like, do you prefer something that's a new construction, where you can make choose the layout and design the space all as per your wish, or do you wish to just take on an existing project and just bring it up to code compliance? Okay, so there's an important important thing to keep in mind when it comes to an illegal suite and you're trying to legalize that. You have to make sure that it is existing, and to figure out if a suite is existing, there are a few criteria. So we're going to talk about that on the next slide. So what is considered an existing suite? So this screenshot here is directly from the city's website. Okay, so there are three main criteria to classify a property suite as an illegal suite. Okay, existing illegal. It's already got to have a bathroom, cooking facilities, and a sleeping/living area. Okay, and the second criteria, the suite's got to be accessible from the outside without going through the main dwelling. So it basically needs a separate entrance. Okay, and the third and the most I would say the most important one is the suite has to be built prior to the specific date, March 12, 2018. If your suite is not built prior to this date, or if it's built after, then it basically classifies as a new construction suite. So even if you have an existing illegal suite, it's basically going to have to follow the rules of a brand new suite. Okay, so that's that. So when you guys are looking at properties or evaluating properties on Realtor.ca or the MLS, if you find an illegal suite and it looks like it was just built and it's an illegal suite, probably not the best idea, because you're going to have to open up all the walls, redo, and meet all the requirements for a new suite, which can be quite expensive, especially if you're because you're going to be having to do all that work.
And a note on this as well. This is the most important point, but it's also the one that's the most in a gray area, because how do you determine when a suite was built, right? So there's a few different ways that this could happen. For example, if there are photos on a previous MLS listing that show that the suite was present prior to 2018. So, for example, there was a sale in let's say 2015, and we can see that that suite was there. That's one way that can be used.
Yep.
Um, it could be, track record from rentals from tenants. There's a few different ways, but it is a gray area because if that suite was not shown to be either existing or non-existing prior to that
Hmm.
date, it becomes a little difficult sometimes, and that's why we have added a note here that the city can request to see proof that that suite was existing prior to that date.
Yep.
However, we personally, both of us have not encountered this, but this is something the city can definitely request. So,
Yep. Yeah, and so yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. It is gray area, and so yeah, the last point is yeah, your suite has to be in the same building or residence as, and it can't be in a detached garage. So, because if it's in a detached garage, it basically conforms to the rules of the backyard suite, right?
yeah,
So
or even if
yeah,
it's a
those are
separate dwelling, any sort of separate dwelling would fall under those rules.
yeah, and that would mean like if you decided to build a super large shed in the back and called it a suite, that wouldn't qualify either. So, all right, next slide. So, so why is there a frenzy towards legalizing these existing suites among real estate investors versus building a brand new suite? And the reasons are quite simple, at least at this point in time. Existing suites have much less stringent code requirements and costs compared to building a brand new suite. Okay, and one example of a very costly endeavor in a new suite is having to put in independent heating ductwork for each unit. So your main floor needs a furnace for itself and its own ductwork. Your basement needs its own furnace and ductwork. And in most cases, this is not, in most houses, this is not the case. It's one furnace and one ductwork, which means you're having to redo everything for the whole house, right? So the cost can be quite a bit, which is why people prefer existing illegal suites. The second reason is right now the city has a grace period until the end of December 2023. So any existing illegal suite, as long as it meets the requirements of an existing illegal suite, can be legalized for a substantially lower cost and less requirements compared to building a brand new suite. Okay. In fact, the city, I put a screenshot there. All development permits and suite registry fees are being waived by the city until the end of next year. So that's already like a $600-700 in savings right there that you otherwise wouldn't have. Okay.
And just to note too, this is one example for the independent duct work. We'll drill into more details on some of the following slides on the differences between the existing and new suites.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the most important ones, but it's not the only one.
Yeah. Okay, so here are just some of the kind of code requirements between existing and new suites. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. Between myself and Anthony, we've both done existing and new suites, so we're very familiar on both sides of it. So on the existing, you basically need, on the existing and new, you're going to need your bedroom egress, your smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, and then your stairways and exits need to be protected. But on the new suite, you have a bunch more requirements, such as your ceiling and door heights have to meet a certain minimums. You have soundproofing requirements. Yeah, a whole bunch of other requirements if you have exterior stairways, plumbing requirements for backflow valves, two heat sources, which is what we talked about earlier. And these are just, this is one of the huge reasons why most investors, at least early on, prefer to go to an existing suite because there's just way less requirements. There's already an illegal suite. They just have to do a bunch of updates to meet code. Okay. And for that reason, these illegal suites have a very strong appeal towards newer investors or less experienced investors for that reason. So the next question then you need to consider is what zoning do I need to have a basement suite that's allowed, right? So when you look at the city's land use bylaw, okay, there are two main classifications that you need to be aware of. One is called a permitted use, and one is called a discretionary use. Okay, and whenever you're browsing listings, whenever we're sending you listings, on the listing it would have the zoning at the bottom in your MLS portal. So it would show you if a property is RC2, RC1, R1, so forth, so on and so forth, right? If it's a permitted use, that means you're basically, for the most part, in the clear. You're good to go and apply for the necessary permits. If you're a discretionary use, it's a slightly different process. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit on the next slide. Okay, so what do these mean? Okay, and what do permitted and discretionary mean? And this applies for both new and existing suites. Okay, and by existing, meaning built prior to March 2018. So if you are a permitted use, okay, the only thing you got to do is go straight to apply for a building permit as long as you meet all your exterior requirements. And we're going to cover what those exterior requirements are on the next slide, okay? And the time to get a building permit, according to the city, it's about a week. And we've found that this is pretty accurate. Now, if you're a discretionary use, for example, your house is an R1 or RC1, okay, you've got to apply for a development permit and a building permit. Now, before you apply for a development permit, if you find that, okay, you don't meet the parking requirements, instead of 2 spots, you only have 1, or you can't fit an amenity space in there, or your parking lot size is too narrow, you have to apply for relaxation or for a variance from the city, okay? So you have to apply for a development permit for that specific relaxation, and then you apply for a secondary suite development permit, you get that approval, and then you apply for a building permit. So this initial first step in a discretionary use zoning can take upwards of 8 weeks. So make sure you plan accordingly. Oftentimes, it's not a bad idea if you're buying an RC1 or a discretionary use area. We often try to ensure that you can go in, get measurements done, or take the necessary photos during your conditional period. And then after that, we get the seller's approval even before you take possession, so you can start applying for your permit, so you're not waiting once you take possession. Okay, so that's a good strategy that we recommend. So once you get your development permit, it's the same process as the permitted use. You just apply for the building permit with all the same paperwork that you've already submitted, and that should take you about a week. Okay. Okay, so if you're in a permitted use, okay, so if you're in a RC2 or R2 or RCG, FC1, so on and so forth, make sure you refer to this slide first before you go straight to applying for your building permit, okay? So you have to meet three main requirements, okay? You've got your lot width requirements, okay? And then you've got your parking requirements, and then you need to be able to show an amenity space on the exterior, like anywhere in the backyard or backyard of the property. If you can't meet all these requirements, even if you're in a permitted use, you're going to need a development permit, okay, to relax the problematic requirements. So it could be parking. In most cases, we find that it's parking, okay? You only have 1 spot instead of 2, or you have like 1.5 spots and it's a little too narrow to fit 2 cars, because the city has specific dimensions, as you can see in point number 2 here. So if you can't meet that, you need a development permit to relax that. If you're in a discretionary zone, so it could be a R1, RC1, you'll need a development permit either way. Even if you meet all these requirements, you will need a development permit, okay? And what the development permit basically is, it just basically, the city's going to come out, they're going to assess your lot, and then they're going to put a sandwich board on your front lawn that basically advertises to your neighbors that you're going to legalize your suite, or you're going to put in a new suite. And if your neighbors have any feedback, they can basically write in and say, well, I don't want Anthony to build a new suite because, well, I don't want suites in my neighborhood or whatever. And the city basically considers your feedback, but they still follow. There are some guidelines that the city still follows. So
one thing to note, though, is they have removed at least the requirement to go get a hearing on council, because historically that was actually done at City Hall. There was hearing for those applications. That's been removed. There's none of that anymore. But yeah, like Santhosh said, there's still the period where the public can provide feedback.
So the next question, now that you know how to navigate it, is how do I apply? So the city's website is excellent. Okay, so we went through development permit process. So the city's website is excellent for legalizing existing suite. It basically breaks it down very cleanly, step by step. We've put a photo here on the right side. This is probably the way most people would do it for legalizing existing suite. Reduced application requirements. So basically, you take photos of all your main areas like your entryway, kitchen, bathroom, so on and so forth. Uh, and you notice they tell you the mechanical room showing the ceiling because that's one of the requirements. They would like the city wants people to drywall the mechanical room as part of legalizing a basement suite. So yeah, and then for a new suite, likewise, they've got a different landing page where it walks you through all the more specific code requirements. And they've got a nice tool if you guys haven't checked it out, where you just put in your address if you don't know what your zoning is, and it basically tells you your zoning is RC1, RC2, whatever, and what you need to do from that point onwards. Okay.
And they do ask for a plan as well of where your outdoor amenity space is going to be and things like that. It doesn't have to be a fancy plan. I've submitted mine on Paint. Essentially, as
Yeah.
long as you show where the house is located, where you're planning to put the parking stalls and things like that, that's all the city needs.
Yeah.
And also,
Exactly.
I saw a note from Chris here that mentioned his application took 2 months for a development permit, 3 weeks for BP. One thing I wanted to put emphasis on is those timelines do vary a lot, actually, depending when you apply. There's periods of time where it's a lot faster and periods where it's a lot longer. Lately, there was a fire at City Hall in the development office, and that created like way more delays with the development permit, especially. So that
Hmm.
that timeline will vary. So
Yeah, these timelines vary. These are just the city's general timelines that they've advertised on their websites. Okay. Uh, so yeah, that I think we've covered kind of the bulk of it. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of kind of specific questions, and that's why we're gonna. Oh yeah, and then we've got one more slide on what's the cost. Everyone's wondering how much does it cost to legalize a suite, and to legalize a suite, there's no straight answer. It depends, right? It depends on how much work the suite needs to bring it up to code, and on top of that, if you're going to do any improvements at that point, then you've got to factor in those costs. Whereas for a brand new suite, you can reasonably expect anywhere from 50K at least on the low end, anywhere up to 110K, right? And then the sky's the limit in terms of how fancy you're going to go with that. And it also depends on size and whatnot. Okay.
yeah, because for the new, existing suites, technically that cost could be zero. It's pretty rare we see that, obviously, because then usually
Yeah.
the homeowner would have legalized it. But what I'm saying by that is, if a suite already meets fire code, meets all the requirements, and all it needs is to be registered and apply for building permit, that fee's being waived. So the cost
Yeah.
can be anywhere from zero up. Like a lot of them, like we'll see a lot of suites that are missing smoke alarms, maybe drywall in the mechanical rooms, and then like most of the other things are good. Like these suites can be done very affordably, legalized very affordably.
So yeah, someone saying the basement we got was built without permit. Nice to bring it up to proper code. Yeah, definitely. It's always nice to bring it up to code. Not sure if your basement was just like a finished basement that was done without a permit or a secondary suite, but yeah, either way, the process is very similar.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like $5,000 is like an amazing investment, right? You
Exactly.
get an uplift in value from doing that, plus obviously all the other benefits. You know,
Yeah, the property value went up just went up way over 5K. So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
definitely like you've made money on it. So
And your
uh,
point, the previous owner being lazy to finish it. I mean, a lot of people don't even know, right? Not everyone knows the process. A lot of people think it's a lot more complicated than it is, or don't want to risk starting the process and not, finishing it. So it's great to pick up some of those properties that need a, a small amount of work to get this legalized. That's not good.
okay, yeah. Someone said found live wires hidden in the wall, low, no vapor barriers. Yeah, but at least when you have the walls opened up, and if you're going to be doing work, then at least you can rectify it at that time, right? So it's definitely a good opportunity to fix that. Okay.
Yeah, Arthur,
Uh,
that's definitely not the case. It depends on the neighborhoods and it depends on the property. So that's something we have to be careful. But in general, you can get like a good 15,000 or so uplift in value from illegal to legal. And that varies. If the basement is larger, it might be more. Some areas like luxury neighborhoods sometimes don't get any value increase, but in general, you can get value increase for sure.
yeah. Okay. And then, like, yeah, there's also this question here. Sorry, for some reason I can't see the names, but I don't know if it's just me. But it says, what's the lift in value? What's the lift in value in your experience? So yeah, I think Anthony just answered that. So really depends on the neighborhood. If you're gonna put a basement suite in a house in Bel Air or Aspen, then the lift in value is way less compared to, say, if you put it in an area where there is a demand for secondary suites, right?
Yeah,
And it could vary from like 20K in lift to up to like 60 to 70K in lift, depending on if it's an illegal suite or a brand new construction, right? So, all right.
so that's a very good question, actually. How much will property tax increase after legalization? That's a hard question because it depends the way the city will view the value increase. So the way that the city assess your property's value is not based on your property alone. They will go and assess value based on an area, like a postal code area, and then make
Yeah.
adjustment based on your property. So that will vary a lot from property to property. In my experience, it's often, especially if you go from illegal to legal, there's often not much of an increase at all from the suite itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that to be the case as well. Like the increase is very minimal, and it really didn't affect my bottom line at all. So, yeah, it's something I wouldn't be too worried about. And if you find that your property tax increase is kind of outrageous, you can always contest that with the city, right? You can go back to them and file for an appeal. So, and they're going to probably ask you for comparable sales of, and you can ask them how they came up with that value and have a discussion with them. So.
Exactly.
Baseboard heating could be an option too for heating, right? Very good question. Absolutely, baseboard heating can be an option for heating. But if you're installing baseboard heaters, you also are going to need a HRV system, heat recovery ventilation or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's just this other fancy machine. Um, but the reason why a lot of people are doing baseboard heating, especially electric baseboard heating, is the costs. Your monthly utility bills are going to be through the roof in the winter, right? Compared to gas heating. Okay, so if you want your tenant to stay there for the long run, it's probably in your best interest to bite the bullet up front and get gas heating installed. Okay.
It's something to weigh, right? Because your utility costs are likely going to be higher, like Santhosh said. However, it is a cheaper option to install, and it's also a lower maintenance option than having two furnaces. Like electric baseboards require no maintenance at all,
Yeah.
but yeah, you will pay for it in your utilities for sure.
Yeah, like if I understand, it probably costs. I'm just throwing out rough numbers here. About a third of the cost to put in two furnaces and ductwork, right?
Mhm.
But you're going to be paying like 150 bucks more per month in utility bills and just your electric bills, right? Because most likely the tenant's going to crank it right up because it's going to get chilly in there and there's no ventilation, there's no air circulation, right? Um, so those add up over time. So um, make sure your appraiser understands the difference between grandfathered, illegal grandfathered to adding a new suite. Definitely not all appraisers are the same. Not all appraisers have the same amount of knowledge when it comes to secondary suites. Um, one recommendation that we do is when you're preparing to have an appraisal done for refinance or whatever the case is, make sure you prepare an appraisal package. So this is like a cover page, and if you did quite a bit of renovation, so take pictures before, after, before, during, and after, and also attach the legal suite paperwork in your appraisal package. So it's basically like a little portfolio that you give to the appraiser, along with some recent comparables. We're not telling them directly how to do their job, and we're not telling them how much the property is worth, but we're giving them numbers that we would like to see, right? And that's how I would approach that when it
Yeah, because
comes to
like Santhosh mentioned, those appraisals are negotiable up to a certain point.
okay.
What I mean by that is if you get an appraisal that you believe is not right and you actually have data to prove it, the appraisers will consider that and they might change their decision and uh, change their appraisal. So as long as you provide them proper valid comps or reasons why their appraisal is lower than it should be, usually you can get those to be negotiated up. So
Mhm. Uh, okay. Not sure we covered that already. Mechanical room needs to be drywalled from Jan 1st, 2022. Yeah, that's a good point. We didn't specifically talk about it, but previously the city did used to allow sprinklers for existing illegal suites. But yeah, as of Jan 1st of this year, it's only drywall only. Okay, and it needs to be the entire room for those wondering. So your ceiling and walls all need to be drywalled,
and that's
including
valid for all ceilings, even outside of the mechanical room.
yeah,
All ceilings have to be drywalled, even crawl space under the stairs, things like that. They still have to be
yeah,
drywalled as well.
yeah, exactly. And we find that that's the mechanical room is like the hardest part for most people to deal with because of all the pipes and all the duct work in the mechanical room. So, um, but it can be done. The drywalling can be done. It's just a painful process. So yeah, I I prefer drywalled, and yeah, I mean once it's drywalled, it does look nice, but it sure takes a lot of work to do it in the mechanical room.
And I mean,
What
it really
specification?
depends on the mechanical room because some rooms are pretty easy to drywall. There's other ones where the sprinklers were really nice to have as an option because there's mechanical rooms that are very, very tight and have lots of ductwork and piping. It can be a real pain in the butt to do drywall in some of them.
Yeah. So okay. And next question here: what specification for drywall in the mech room? So you just need your regular standard half-inch drywall on all walls and ceilings. Okay. And then you just need to fill all your screw holes, tape all the joints with one coat of mud. Okay. It doesn't have to look pretty. It just needs to look like it's sealed up. That's it. Okay. Um, I wish I knew that. Failed inspection today. I'm sorry about that. Well, at least now you know, right?
Was
So
that because you had sprinklers, Arthur? You can tell us in the comments.
yeah,
That's a good question. I don't think so. The sprinklers are not linked to the smoke alarms. They have their
yeah,
own trigger system, so there would need to be a heat source for the sprinklers to go. So
yeah,
they wouldn't go just because someone's burning toast in the kitchen.
yeah, yeah. I don't think. Yeah, they're definitely not interconnected to the smoke alarm, so you don't have
No.
to worry about that. Yeah, sprinklers are only activated by temperature or if they're impacted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
good.
So that's good. Yeah, good point. Um, yeah. Any other questions on perhaps permits or anything like that? Or,
Okay.
we want to answer as many questions as
Look.
possible today.
So
So inspector told me today that mud falls off. I better use silicone. Think of
I've
your
never heard of
drywall
mud
muds. Yeah,
falling.
think if your drywall mud's falling off. Either your mud's probably like watered down, or someone really didn't do their job. So,
Yeah, yeah, like ceilings. Like mud is
yeah,
used all over your ceilings, for
like
drywall.
yeah, wherever
Yeah.
you're living, it probably has drywall in the ceiling somewhere. So there's probably mud on there. So For the joints in the mechanical room, no, we've never heard of that. I don't think that's good practice either to be using silicone. So, um, yeah, they may be talking about fire caulking. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if it's just around like small like pipe penetrations and whatnot, yeah, you can use. I think they've got the orange kind of caulking for that, and
Oh yeah, so
the blue stuff.
that wouldn't be for the joints between the drywall. That would be for
Yeah,
just like
just
gap.
the little openings and gaps. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. Okay.
So one thing we may or may not have mentioned as well, because that's a common question we get, is for the smoke alarms, they have to be hardwired to a power source, but they don't have to be hardwired together. They have to be interconnected. That can be wirelessly or hardwired, so you have the option of either. But they do need a power source either way to each one of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, and for the most part, this it's a really pretty straightforward job for any electrician to do these. So yeah, and do you know that if you're legalizing your suite and you need these smoke detectors, then uh, you're going to need an electrical permit for that as part of the legalization process, and that could probably cost. I don't remember the cost off the top of my head, but
I think it's around
uh,
$80 or something like that. Your electrician
okay,
can pull the permit for you as well.
yeah,
So
yeah, you can either get the electrician or you can get that done too. So okay, from an investor's perspective, why legalize a suite versus keep an illegal suite? Yeah, good points. We did cover it earlier in the presentation. Anthony, do you want to pull up that slide again?
yeah, yeah, we'll go back to it and review that with you.
Maybe go to that very first slide on why legalize it, because
Yeah,
that's yeah. So, so yeah, I'm not sure who you are, a Facebook user, but why legalize a suite?
that is Ellie.
Ellie. Okay, hi Ellie. Um, so it adds to your property's resale value, right? So if you have a legal suite, and if you're trying to do a refinance, you're definitely going to get a higher ARV or appraisal value compared to keeping an illegal suite, assuming rents are the same, right? And if you do decide to sell your property that's a legal suite, it's going to be easier for the incoming buyer to obtain their mortgage financing versus keeping an illegal suite. Because a lot of lenders, we talked about this earlier, a lot of lenders don't like to count the income from an illegal suite, whereas that's not the case if your suite's legal, right?
When I mean,
Uh,
probably the number one too is regulations because the illegal suite is illegal, right? So if you have a complaint from a tenant, if you have a fire, if you have any sort of issues, you can be in trouble. Like the city can shut down that suite if they get a
yep,
complaint and investigate. If there's a fire and your suite is, shown to have improper, like not meeting fire code, like for example, like missing smoke alarms, having too small windows, you could get sued for things like that. So, like the number
exactly.
one reason for sure is definitely to be compliant and meet regulations. But then there's a bunch of added reasons on top of that. So,
Yeah, exactly. To us, it's a no-brainer. Like you should just get your suite legal while you can,
yeah.
right? Especially while the requirements are fairly lenient right now for existing illegal suites. So this would be the time to do it, right?
And this may not be forever. The city was supposed to stop that program about a year ago, I think, Santhosh.
Yeah, I think December last year or maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They decided to extend it because they felt that not enough people had taken advantage of the program and that the momentum was started. But an important thing to note is the city at some point will likely stop that program. They've talked
yeah,
about it before, they're talking about it again. So, do it while you
last
can.
year.
We don't know how long it's going to last. And once that program is over, legalizing an existing suite will become harder than building one from scratch. Because
Yeah,
then you have to do so much work to bring it to code that you might as well just start with a blank slate.
yeah, exactly. So like at least what I'm thinking is legal suites or existing illegal suites past December 2023 are basically going to lose your value because at that point you might
Yeah.
as well got the whole basement and start from scratch, right? Um, if you have to comply with the requirements of a new suite, most of the time, all these older illegal suites, uh, if you have to gut the whole thing and you're like, oh, okay, I'll go back to the framing, even your framing's not up to code. Okay, most of the time I've seen all these illegal suites, they don't have pressure treated wood on the concrete, and that's an immediate fail for a framing. Like when you call an inspector in for a building inspection. Okay, so at that point, you might as well just rip the whole thing down, back to your concrete, and reframe. Right. So these illegal suites are not going to be worth anything after um, the amnesty period's over.
And another thing to point to is with that program and the sticker that we see here, like a lot of people are putting those stickers on their door. Oh, I think I deleted the image, but anyway, you get my point. A lot of tenants are getting more aware of the illegal suites and their existence. So there are tenants out there that are demanding and asking questions. I've had tenants apply for my suites and ask to see the registry. It doesn't happen often, but that's becoming more and more common. So if you get one of those tenants and you can't show them that you have a legal suite, before they even rent from you, they can go and complain to the city. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And the city is also trying to raise awareness on that because I've seen like billboards when you enter the community. I saw one in Terradale the other day. I saw another sign that says "Ensure your suite is legal and safe." There was a big sign right as you enter Bowness as well. So clearly, the city is pushing for it and to make people more aware of it. So yeah.
any other questions? So I think that's it then.
Okay, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We hope everyone got value from this, and yeah, this whole presentation is recorded anyway, so it'll be posted on Facebook if you want to refer back. And yeah, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions.
Yeah, we'll be happy to help you out. Have a good one,
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah, thanks.